What's up, everybody? Today we are going to be looking at trade rumors and possible targets for the Timberwolves for this upcoming deadline here on the 10th, but also just names that have been tied to the Timberwolves for the last year or so. We've got three main players that we're focusing on. We also had some of you send in pictures and trade scenarios that you were interested in seeing on this video, so I will put those up there as well. So basically, we're going to get right into that. We're going to start with some of the three names that everybody has tied the most to the Timberwolves. Some possible, some not possible. So let's jump right in. So first up, we've got Marcus Smart. So we're going to roll some Marcus Smart highlights while we do this. This is from last year, I believe. Oh yeah, this is last year. But Marcus Smart is probably an interesting name. Also, it's similar because he's kind of that Pat Bev type of player, a little bit more gritty, a little bit more effort and like drawing charges and, scrappy, interesting possibility of a player, somebody that you never would have really expected in Minnesota other than maybe KG days. When I first heard this name, it was very surprising to me that would be a possibility. And to be honest, it came on pretty quickly. Like, I know we were tied to him last summer. I think Darren Wolfson had some reports out last summer that we were interested in him. Now, he signed a pretty long-term contract right now, if I remember correctly. So trading for him would be a long-term commitment. Not saying that there's anything to really be worried about. It's just that we have not had a lot of time to think about this. I mean, he's obviously an incredible player and would be a great asset. And I think the thing that Timberwolves need to do now, more than ever, is kind of thin their bench. I know our bench has been playing really well over the last 3 or 4 or even a couple weeks. However, we've got a lot of bench players, Like back in the Tibbs days, Tibbs only wanted to rock with like 7 or 8 guys. And to be honest, that's not necessarily a terrible thing. Now, do you want to have the ability to have 10, 11, 12 deep? Sure. But I think we have a lot of people that have similar skill sets that we could maybe turn into one better player or somebody that would at least serve us better currently. I'm not saying that we're a win now team, but I think we certainly should be attempting some major movement in the playoffs, at least making the playoffs. I think that would take an insane fall to move out of the playoffs. We'd have to lose like a play-in game and then lose another one or something. It'd be bad. But you don't want to be in that situation, And I think with a lot of the young players that we have right now, you could trade some young players for an experienced player like Marcus Smart. But, this is an interesting player to get. And if you could move him for a pick and, if you're able to move like a pick and Josh Okogie or Jake Layman or, you could even, it might take more, obviously the Boston fans, if any Boston fans are watching this, they're like, absolutely not. We're not going to take just a draft pick for him. Because I think a lot of Boston fans really like him. I saw some reports coming out that it's like, why would we want to trade him? But, you could also be looking at somebody like a Jaden McDaniels. Most of you probably watching right now have watched our live streams. Shout out to live streams. I am not a Jaden McDaniels hater, but I also am a firm believer in that he's a project. He's a project, a playable project right now. But if you get a player like Marcus Smart right now, or Jaden and a pick or something, that would be interesting. Now what pick is that? Is a second round? Hopefully, a first and Jaden would be pretty pricey for a player like that. And obviously you got to make salaries work too. But that's an interesting move. So I'm at least interested in that. I would say possibility of this happening is very possible. I think we have easily enough assets to get Marcus Smart via draft picks, via players, all that. So reachability or the ability to get a player like Marcus Smart, I think is very high. And to have a defender like that, to have even, the 3-point shooting hasn't been super great, but like to have a 3-point shooter, just to have a semi-combo guard type player that defends alongside Anthony Edwards, alongside D'Lo and his communication, and Towns and Vanderbilt, that's pretty exciting, So I like the possibility of that. We'll see, maybe a Malik Beasley could be thrown in there as well to make salaries match, but then you wouldn't, giving up Malik and Jaden, like maybe it's tricky. You don't know how much Boston values him too. So I'd say it's very possible. How likely is that trade? I kind of feel like no trades are likely. Not to spoil the video, but I feel like we're really low on the likelihood of any trades happening. If it happens, I think it would be even smaller of a player. Like we're trying to trade for like an Alex Len or something like that just to get a backup big. But I think this is the most possible exciting trade that could happen leading up to the deadline. Next up, we've got Myles Turner. So Myles Turner is a big name, but the Indiana Pacers are having a fire sale. They just moved Karis LeVert to the Cavs when they played the Cavs, so he moved locker rooms. But they've moved Karis LeVert, and that is kind of the first domino to fall for them. They definitely have more dominoes falling. I would be surprised if they keep Turner and Sabonis. Maybe even both are on the move. I'm not sure. They've got Duarte, I believe is his name. How you spell it? I don't know. There's a coffee shop that I remember that was a similar name, so I might be saying it wrong. But that is a real possibility that they have a big fire sale going on, and they move on from both of those players. And Myles Turner would be a very good get for the Timberwolves. Now, likely a pricey one. You are probably looking at the likelihood of giving up picks. They definitely are rebuilding, so they're going to want picks / a Jaden / who knows, they might want a lot more. I think Malik Beasley would be a great filler. Not just a filler as salary, although his salary is a big filler. That could be a possibility if they wanted a shooter like that. He still has a couple years on his contract, though. One with a team option, so that would be nice for a rebuilding team. You could also look at more of an expiring, like a Taurean Prince, get a big contract. That would also help, too, with some of these rebuilding efforts. But you're going to have to give up picks. You're going to have to give up Jaden, and maybe other pieces, too. Just because he's a solid piece. I mean, obviously, he's a starting caliber power forward, center type player, just a big. And I think I would really like to see this player on the Timberwolves. Likelihood of this happening, I think, is quite unlikely. I just don't see the Timberwolves doing a big move. Now, I don't have the inside sources that a John Krasinski or a Darren Wolfson have, or a Dane Moore. But if you read some of their recent articles, now Darren Wolfson is always very promising and very hopeful on trades, which also gets me excited. But John Krasinski, I think, has a little bit better ear to the floor door, whatever the saying is, on like what is possible. And in one of his most recent athletic pieces, he kind of mentioned that it would be pretty unlikely for something like that to happen. I won't spoil the whole story, but basically it's pretty unlikely. But not impossible. So likelihood of this happening, I think, is quite unlikely. Possibility, I think it's certainly possible. Again, it's not one of these trades like, it's not like a Ben Simmons trade like we're about to talk about, but where you kind of wonder like, oh, we'd have to give up Ant or Cat or D'Lo or something like that, something that we don't want to give up right now. We would be able to. So that's kind of where we are there. So this is a possibility, but you're really going for a home run then, because then you're hoping that you're making a deep playoff run this year. And I don't know if we have a deep playoff run in us. I think we have a playoff run in us. Like we could have a good series, maybe even make it to another series. But I think this is a big gamble to give away a lot of draft picks and a Jaden type player to get back somebody like a Myles Turner, who's a solid player, like I said, but we're also we're still a building team too, and if we can succeed with our young players now and move them when we need to, that seems like a better move to me. So I would maybe opt about going against this trade right now. However, I will say if I see the Shams or Woj notification come through, I'm gonna be hyped. I'm gonna be hyped. I'm gonna have to think about it later, but at the moment, I'm gonna be hyped. Next up, Ben Simmons. But Ben Simmons is one of the most talked about players when it comes to trade rumors in Minnesota. Ben Simmons would be a phenomenal get. I think a lot of people, including 76ers fans, including Minnesota Timberwolves fans, Brooklyn Nets fans, everybody that has a chance at him, are forgetting how good he can be. Sure, he is not a jump shooter, and I think that's what a lot of people look at. But he is an elite defender in the league. Obviously has crazy finishing, dunking ability if he doesn't pass it up. But he He's a playmaker. He does it all. You know, he's a great addition to any team. Do I think that the 76ers are looking for too much? Certainly. The 76ers are looking for, I mean, they're looking, the things that they were looking for from the Kings are insane. They're asking for like all of their top players. They really think that this is like a top 5 player in the league. I'm not going that far, but I do think that people sleep on him just a little bit. But there's valid concerns about him too, because he has not played now for almost a year, and the fact that he hasn't played, not only physically you worry about that, mentally you worry about that. You worry about I mean, obviously this happens once, this could happen again, and it's really hard to speculate on this stuff because you hear rumors about things, you hear things about like it could be a mental health thing, it could be like Shaq was saying that he was like calling him out on TV the other day on TNT. And then he texts him and he's very hush hush about it, and that makes me think that it is something a little bit more personal. And it's like, I don't know, it's weird. It's hard to gauge reactions, and I don't want to unfairly treat somebody just because of speculation. But at the same time, you have to wonder that as a franchise if that's something that you're willing to take a risk on. And the risk, we were talking about this with Myles Turner giving up picks and like a Jaden type player. You're going to have to worry about that times 10 with Ben Simmons because of what they want from Ben. For Ben, I should say. They want James Harden-esque player. So you're going to have to give up like a D'Lo, Jaden, multiple picks, and realistically that might not even do it. You might need more of like an Ant player or a Towns, which doesn't make any sense. They wouldn't do that. But they're going to need that type of level of player, or that's what they're expecting. Maybe they're just positioning themselves for trade talks with other teams in doing this, but you never know. So, and as much as I'd be hyped for a Myles Turner trade, I'd be super hyped for a Ben Simmons trade. But it all depends on what we're giving up. It makes a lot more sense to do a 3-team trade, and there's some 3-team trades out there that are interesting and possible. There's even one really ridiculous one that I'm going to show you from somebody in our Discord. Shout out our Discord. Yeah, the possibility of a Ben Simmons trade, unlikely. The ability to do it, like how likely, is one of those ones where I don't know if we have the correct pieces / are in a spot to give up the biggest pieces that we would need. I'm not willing to give up an Ant for anybody, really anyone at this moment. I think Ant has a ceiling that is very, very high. He has had his ups and downs for sure. He is not consistent, but he's 20. He's 20 years old. I'm ready to ride the Ant train for the next few years, and kind of go up and down if we need to. But I just believe in him, and in Ben Simmons, I'm not going to trade. Sure, maybe he's more of a win now player, but I just think that the Timberwolves right now have a little bit of flexibility, given their success this year, moving forward. So, I'd love to see Ben Simmons, and if you can somehow get Ben Simmons on a team with D'Lo, Towns, and Ant, and possibly keeping like a Vanderbilt or something like that, and a Pat Bev, that's a lot to ask for as a Timberwolves fan, and I think it's unrealistic to expect something like that. But if there's a possibility to do that, I think you do. If that's a lot of picks, do a lot of picks, I think. But you also have to remember, you're screwed if you lose them. All right, so we've got some trades from people on Twitter. I've got a Discord one that we'll save for last. Some of these trades are realistic, some of these are not, but I figured I'd share them anyways. So one was for Dennis Schroeder of the Boston Celtics, who I forget that I never watch Boston. I hate Boston so much. But a very gettable player on a 1-year deal for Jake Layman, Josh Okogie, and a couple seconds. I honestly don't think that would be impossible, but to be completely honest with you and transparent, I have no clue what Boston needs. I mean, me personally, I think Boston needs either a Karl-Anthony Towns, or they need to blow it up. I know they're still kind of early in those stages, but I just feel like they are not going anywhere fast. And maybe they're fine with that, but they need a lot. I don't know how much this trade helps them other than just getting off of a expiring contract. I don't even know if Schroeder's really playing that much for them, to be honest with you. But it would be nice to have an additional point guard for us. I think a point guard would be a great addition for us. Um, just because Pat Bev is great, D'Lo is great, both are injured frequently. And J-Mac, although he's been okay lately, I still don't know if I fully trust him. And like, who's gonna fully trust their third string, fourth string guards? But we need a guard if we're gonna go to the playoffs. We can't have Jordan McLaughlin starting out there. As much as we love J-Mac or don't, we need more than that. So, Schroeder, interesting possibility. How likely is this trade? I think it's pretty likely. I don't think there's anything keeping them from trading him. I feel like we might have to add a little bit more. I mean, 2 seconds isn't so bad, and then Josh is a great defender, all expiring as well. So possible. Not a huge fan of this trade, but like I am a fan of getting a point guard. So I'm done. Next trade we have. Kind of doing a slow reveal here. This is a Ben Simmons trade. So Ben Simmons comes, I know it's kind of hard to read. Ben Simmons to the Timberwolves, Bradley Beal to the 76ers, and then the Wizards get Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, and Jake Layman. Plus, they added in a separate tweet, I believe, that we're throwing in 2 unprotected firsts, or maybe it was just 2 firsts. I can't remember if they specified or not. It would definitely have to be unprotected firsts. Because Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, and Jake Layman are obviously not pulling enough for Ben Simmons or Bradley Beal on their own. So definitely going to need some picks. 3 probably unprotected picks or very lightly protected picks would need to go to them. And, that might be possible with a couple unprotected picks. I don't know, again, another East Coast team that I just don't know much about. I don't know what the Wizards are really game planning for. They get all those pieces in the Westbrook trade that are interesting, and they're doing well at times, but they're still around 500, I believe they're around 500. My ghost dog is taking over in the background. But, this is one of those possibilities of like a 3-team trade. I still think you'd probably have to give a bigger piece, probably like a Jaden or something like that, just to give him some amount of a hope. Because, I mean, Malik, sure, decent. Pat Bev, obviously, we value him, but like he's going to a team that's not going to be in the playoffs, and I don't even know if he'd want to do that. But he's got a new contract coming up, and he's probably going to be expecting a lot with especially how much he's influenced our team this year. And then you got Jake Layman, who's like nothing. So interesting. Possibility-wise, I don't think this is very possible, only because 3-team trades are just tricky. I don't doubt that the 76ers want Bradley Beal. I don't doubt that the Timberwolves want Ben Simmons. I do doubt that the Wizards want to give up Bradley Beal, especially for maybe not that much. Remember, this is including 2 firsts, but still. Next trade. Next trade is, they say trades aren't always win-win, I hope, for a realistic steal. Okay. So, Rashawn Holmes and I think that's Terrence Davis? I can't read the name. My bad. But then Malik Beasley, Naz Reid in a second. So, originally I've never, for some reason, I was always mad playing against Rashawn Holmes. He's just a high energy player that is just easily beating the Wolves all the time. And it frustrates me. Recently, in a couple of his games, I feel like there was a video that came out the other day that was just kind of like glaring in how much he wasn't caring on defense in particular. No doubt we need like a scoring 4 or just a scoring big. Well, we don't necessarily need a scoring big, but we need somebody that's another scrappy, bigger player. But I think I'm more leaning towards, I would much rather, this is so weird, but I would rather go for somebody like an Alex Len or something along those lines. Kind of weird, but like just having a traditional center that's like a big defender that you can get for cheap, which is the tricky part and why it's Alex Len and not somebody else, like DeAndre Ayton or something. Like obviously we can't get somebody like that, but I think that's a gettable player. I think there's other gettable players like Alex Len that you can get for relatively cheap. And like the Brooklyn Nets, they have Claxton. He's interesting. I don't know how much they're looking for him, but like that would be an interesting player to get to or look at. Maybe not very possible, but I think there's better options than Rashawn Holmes in his 4-year contract. although you want to have players locked into the Minnesota Timberwolves so you don't have to worry about re-signing. I think I'm not a huge fan of this, but getting rid of Malik and Nas, I'm not so opposed to. And then getting a player like Rashawn Holmes in return, that's okay. That's decent. So let's move on to the next. The next trade is from one of my friends, Brantley, and he always bothers me about Karl-Anthony Towns and trading him. Now, as you probably all know, I am not necessarily the biggest Karl-Anthony Towns fan off the court. Not that he does anything bad. It's just a little bit of a cringe factory. But that was cringe saying cringe factory. I'm sorry. But he says Karl-Anthony Towns and Josh Okogie for Gordon Hayward and Mason Plumlee. No, that's a no. That's pretty much all that needs to be said. We can move on to Karl-Anthony Towns trades at some point if we don't succeed with this team. Like let's say we have a miserable playoff failure and then the next season is really bad. We got to start talking about moving trades for Towns, just because at that point it's been eight-ish years. It's a long time. We got to be doing something by then, and he's got to be doing something by then. Okay, last trade of the day. This is a ridiculous one. Not gonna happen. However, I would say that like if you could coordinate this and you were best buddies, if all these 3 GMs were best buddies and we're like in a group chat together and they're like, oh, what if we did this trade? Maybe, just maybe, it's not impossible. I know probably a lot of people are gonna laugh at me for this trade, and go ahead, leave a comment, tell me how crazy I am for this trade. This isn't my trade, I should say, but I do like this and endorse this trade. But this is from Gerald in our Discord. So obviously ridiculous. So the Timberwolves end up with Myles Turner and Ben Simmons, two of the top high-profile available players right now. You would be giving up D'Angelo Russell, but what happens is, so the Timberwolves get the 2 great players. Obviously, we give up D'Lo, which we'd have to find a solution for. We can't just run with Pat Bev and Jordan McLaughlin. But we give up D'Lo. The 76ers get D'Lo, and they get Sabonis, and they get Batase. That's an interesting trade for them. I don't know if it's necessarily what they want, but D'Lo I think is a good addition to their team. I think Sabonis would be an interesting addition as well, and that's 2 quality players. Maybe they wanted James Harden instead, but like I don't think this is a terrible deal for them. They're getting a lot. And then the Pacers. Obviously, you have to think about the Pacers, and the 76ers have talked about and thrown in ideas of Tobias Harris being traded. So they would end up with Tobias Harris. They'd get Malik Beasley, Jake Layman, 2 first-round picks from us, and a first round from Philly. I almost wonder, though, in this situation, if Philly wouldn't need to give up a first to the Pacers. Maybe. It gets a little hairy just because of how many players are moving. You're looking at like the value of this, and obviously the 76ers are getting a lot better. The Timberwolves are getting a lot better, given the point guard situation would have to be resolved somehow, and maybe you throw in a point guard to this deal somehow, even if it's a backup or something. You can't have nothing. Maybe we do that Dennis Schroeder deal with other players. That could work. Because suddenly you're adding 2 just legitimate players to your team. Possibly both All-Stars, previous All-Stars, I think. But sure, they both play. They're both bigs. But Ben Simmons obviously can run a little bit of point, so that eliminates some of that. I still just think you can't have J-Mac be your technical second point guard. That just can't happen. Pat Bev's going to be injured. He's going to be on and off the court, even probably in the playoffs. So, but I love this deal. I think this would be really interesting. Sure, you're giving up 2 picks, but you're getting 2 great players in return. And if you're going to get some stuff from Ben Simmons, and you have a healthy Myles Turner, that's interesting for the Wolves. And then the 76ers get a lot better, and they actually get value, tons of value for that. They may even end up with some draft picks in this deal too, if this was a real one. So they'd get value now and maybe some draft picks for movement later. And I think the Pacers, this makes a lot of sense too. You get rid of 2 players. You don't want to get rid of Sabonis and Myles Turner, but at the same time you are kind of trying to rebuild. So if you can rebuild by acquiring 3 or more first round picks, along with like a Tobias Harris and Malik Beasley in the meantime, that's not so bad, you know. And you know, this could also, not that I'm not trying to get Jaden out of here, but like Jaden could also go to the Pacers instead of a pick, or you know, something like that. Um, I think this is a possibility. How possible? Not possible. Not very possible. Just because these trades, this is something that happens in 2K. This is not something that happens in real life. As much as I think this is an interesting trade, I haven't thought about it analytically. I don't know what this would do to like our rotations. I don't know what this would do to like our offensive rating, defensive rating. I mean, defensive would likely go up still, and we still have a lot of skilled offensive players. So it's interesting. I think it's a fun one. Just wanted to throw it in there, um, but yeah. So that's pretty much all I had. Kind of a longer episode. But in case you're still here, we do post game shows after every single Timberwolves game. So we're talking Wolves. We grade every player on a tier list for their nightly production. We talk about trades and stuff like this in there. Maybe not as in depth as this, but we do go over rumors. Talk about memes that are happening in the Timberwolves. All the stuff Timberwolves. You know, we do it after every game, and we're definitely going to be doing it after playoff games, playing games, all that stuff. We'll be here for the trade deadline. I'm thinking we're maybe going to even do a show for the trade deadline, depending on how active it is, just to see if the Timberwolves do anything. If they don't, sad, but maybe not. Because at the end of the day, I think what I will say is I am very content with keeping the team as is. You know, there's players that I'm interested in moving, and there's players that I'm interested in acquiring. But at the end of the day, this team is more successful than we've been in a while, other than Butler year. So I'm pretty comfortable staying put. But anyways, I appreciate you for watching. If you're new here, leave a sub. Like I said, we do this after every single Timberwolves game. Maybe not this, but we do post-game shows after every single Timberwolves game. Follow us on Twitter. That's where a lot of our content is. We've got the Discord. I'll link it down in the description below. Feel free to like the video. And if you have any other trade ideas that you have interest in, feel free to leave them in the comments. There's plenty of other trades out there that I did not include in this. Probably a lot better trades too. But you know, something to think about. Will Marcus Smart be on the Timberwolves in the next couple days? Will Ben Simmons be on the team in a couple days? Who knows? But if they are, you will hear it from us, and we will be live talking about it. So, anyways, appreciate you watching. You guys have a good one, and we'll see you on the next post-game show.